General Jack Keane is a Fox News contributor, and he spoke to Maria Bartiromo. He used the Israel-Palestine crisis in order to push for war with Iran, or at the very least raising tensions with Iran. Take a look at this, and then I'll tell you a little more about this character.
Joining me right now is Fox News senior strategic analyst General Jack Keane. He is also a retired four-star Army general and a Presidential Medal of Freedom recipient, the highest civilian honor. The Memorial Day weekend, sir, we thank you for your service. General, it's good to see you.
It's great seeing you, Maria.
So what is your take on all of this? The ceasefire in place, does it last? What are your thoughts about all of the money sent to the Palestinian Authority? Have we changed course entirely in the Middle East?
Well, we're beginning to, and I said when the Biden administration came in, while it looked like they were going to move in the right direction in China, wasn't sure about Russia, but I was convinced that they had a potential for a strategic blunder in the Middle East. And that is unfolding right before our eyes, because they're failing to recognize something that former Director Radcliffe mentioned. Iran is the chief sponsor of the proxy wars that have taken place in the Middle East and of terrorism in the Middle East. So the three major organizations that were firing on Israel just recently for those 11 days, the Hezbollah, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and Hamas, who did most of it, all of them work for the Ayatollah in Iran. He sponsors them. And believe me, the attack by Hamas would not have happened if Iran did not okay it, Maria. And that is the link that has to be established. The other problem we have there is the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank under Mahmoud Abbas for 16 years has rejected all the concessions that Israel has wanted to make. That is why the Arab nations walked away from the Palestinians. It's not that they don't care about the suffering there. It's not that they don't want the situation resolved with Israel, but it's a recognition that they have much more in common with Israel in confronting Iran, who's the major destabilizer in the region, than they have with the Palestinians in trying to resolve what appears to be an intractable situation with terrorists running Hamas in Gaza and corrupt leadership, Mahmoud Abbas, taking the donor money in the Palestinian Authority and making no progress. So the fact that we're not dealing with Iran is a major flaw by this administration. They should have been called out immediately. We should have got up from our chairs in Vienna, where the deal is being negotiated, a nuclear deal, where we're attempting to revisit the original 2015 nuclear deal that so many of us feel is fundamentally flawed. We should have stopped those negotiations immediately because Iran was behind the attack on Israel. And until that attack was ended by Hamas, there's going to be no discussions. But and you just made an unbelievable point that they haven't even brought the word Iran up in any of the discussions with the American people about what has taken place for those 11 days and also for what has taken place right now with Secretary Blinken in the Middle East. I can tell you this, that Prime Minister Netanyahu and his people around him gave Secretary Blinken an earful about Iran's complicit behavior here. And we have got to stop accommodating them and appeasing them, because it has got us nowhere.
Well, they're not holding Iran accountable. They're not holding China accountable. I want to take a short break.
Yeah, they're not holding Iran or China accountable. They should totally hold them accountable. And by that I mean they should... What? How? We already have sanctions out the wazoo on these countries, or at least on Iran. China's a slightly different scenario because they hold a lot of our debt and we're massive trading partners with them. What do you want them to do? What do you want them to do? You want to stand up to Iran or China? Be very clear. Be very specific. What do you want to do? At the very least, you want to increase tensions. But it sounds like you're flirting with some sort of military confrontation, at least in the case of Iran. What do you want to do? What do you want to do? Now, listen, that guy, General Jack Keane, who you saw talking there, he works for the Institute for the Study of War. Sounds very official, right? Well, guess what? They are described as a hawkish Washington group favoring a, quote, aggressive foreign policy. They think of themselves as nonpartisan. Really, they're a hawkish Washington group, and they favor an aggressive foreign policy. It is a neocon think tank. You know who funds them? Raytheon, General Dynamics, DynCorp, and other defense contractors. So in other words, this guy who they're presenting as an expert is paid by the defense contractors, and he goes out there and says, oh yeah, we should be more aggressive, we should be more hawkish, we should hold them accountable, we should maybe push for war. And he's getting paid by the people who profit off of war. And of course, there was nothing in the segment where Maria Bartiromo did full transparency. This guy gets paid by Raytheon and General Dynamics and DynCorp and other defense contractors. Just so you know, so he's biased in favor of, hey, we should be aggressive. We should, escalate. We should raise tensions. We should maybe do war. He's biased in that direction. They don't say a word about it. Maria Bartiromo doesn't say a word about it. This is how corrupt. This is like the military media industrial complex. That's what this is. By the way, the point they're trying to make also is absurd. Oh, so Israel was bombing civilian targets in Gaza, therefore war with Iran. What? Because Iran backs Hamas and funds Hamas. So I don't see the connection between, Israel is bombing civilian targets in Gaza, therefore the U.S. should go to war with Iran or increase tensions with Iran. I don't see that connection, not even a little bit. In his mind, it's just like Israel good because they're our partner, and Israel doesn't like Hamas, and Hamas is linked to Iran, therefore let's back our partner Israel and increase tensions with Iran or go to war with Iran or whatever. Bottom line is, this dude gets paid to be pro-war, and so he goes out there and does pro-war talking points. He's a complete hack, and last thing we need is another war in the Middle East. That's the absolute last thing we need. It's, plus they're not an actual threat to us. Who are we kidding? What a joke this is. This guy forgot the question, but he knows the answer is more war because he gets paid to say the answer is more war.